Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. And of course, this week we're talking about UFC Vegas 94. It's going down at the Apex Center, and we've got Amanda Lemos taking on Virna Jandiroba, a all-Brazilian battle in the women's strawweight division. And this is a contenders fight. This is a meaningful fight within the division, but boy, oh boy, we are scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of the name value for this week's UFC card. However, there's still going to be fun fights. There's still going to be betting action. There's still going to be a lot to break down. So I'm happy to be here. I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. Got to just say off the top, has not been my best couple of weeks of picking fights. We had a 2-week break, came back, and the reads just were not on point. But I'm excited to have another crack at it. We're getting back into a rhythm. We've got fights week after week, and that always helps my process. So without further ado, guys, we're going to start off on this card like we always do for the first look from the main event, work our way on down. I have a lot of tape, a lot of research still to do over the course of the week. But in the nature of first look, we wanted to get this done early this week. We wanted to make sure we talk to you guys early in the week, get some thoughts out there, get our creative process flowing, and from there we'll look to find good spots. We'll look to find great analysis over the course of the week and get on track. So without further ado, guys, I will mention I've done well betting these fighters in the past, especially Amanda Lemos. Very profitable. I made a lot of money on the Jessica Andrade fight. I had Andrade many ways, including by sub plus 600 in that fight. So I'm excited to talk about this main event. I think that, Virna Jandiroba is a woman that doesn't always get her due because, she's not the most marketable fighter. However, on the other side, Amanda Lemos, she's gotten the big opportunities. She's been towards the mountaintop in this division. She's fought for the title, and she's looking to earn her way back. She's not a young woman, so she's here to really make a statement. And I think that we should have an interesting main event on our hands. So without further ado, guys, let's break it down. We got Amanda Lemos. She's coming into this bout 14-3-1 as a professional. And when I'm looking at her UFC record, 8-3, pretty exemplary. You look at the losses on her record as well. Jeong Li, one of the top pound for pound women in the sport. We've got Jessica Andrade, a former UFC champion, fought at multiple weight divisions. Obviously, her best work has been done in this strawweight division, which is where she was able to defeat Amanda Lemos. And like I said, I bet heavily on that outcome. And then Amanda Lemos lost to Leslie Smith back in the day. If my memory serves, yeah, indeed. That was a bantamweight fight. So Amanda Lemos, guys, started her UFC career up in the bantamweight division. Obviously, now she's at an optimal weight class at 115 pounds. She's very strong. She's very physical. What we know about her, she has rare power for women's MMA. And we could talk about that in all phases of the fight, right? She has 2 wins by submission, one against the karate hottie, Michelle Waterson-Gomez. And I know what you're thinking, Liam, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, she's clearly washed. True, but she's 9-4 career to the submission. So it's been difficult throughout the course of her career to submit her, and she's only been submitted twice in the UFC in a pretty lengthy career. So wanted to give that credit where it is due to Amanda Lemos. And then in addition to that, right, the rear naked choke that she got on Miranda Granger, if you guys go back and watch that, it's not the most technical jiu-jitsu maneuver you've ever seen. It's like a no hooks rear naked choke, but I've always said, it's not always about what's technical in fighting. It's about what's effective. And she's so strong. She gets the arm under the chin. She gets the other arm behind it. She just squeezes. And very quickly, without the hooks, without that much time passing on the clock, Miranda Granger goes stiff as a board. It was absolutely unbelievable. So Amanda Lemos, clearly very physically strong, but then you see the knockout power manifesting on the feet as well. We go back to that UFC record. She's 3-1 career to the knockout, and the loss was to Leslie Smith back at 135 via strikes. Otherwise, she's been the one who's been able to go out there and hurt women on the feet. Marina Rodriguez put her down in that fight. I had a big bet on Amanda Lemos in that fight as well. I actually had a big bet on Michelle Waterson-Gomez, right? Celebrate the wins, own the losses. I thought Waterson-Gomez was going to compete. I had Waterson-Gomez by sub, and the pure irony and pain of her getting submitted instead, that one will stay with me. That's what taught me to start betting these ends by instead of just the one person's method of submission, because you can open yourself up to more equity in that case. But speaking about the specifics, right? You look at her win-loss record. She's beaten the likes of Mackenzie Dern, Marina Rodriguez, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, Angela Hill, Montserrat Conejo Ruiz, Livina Souza, Minoki Inoue. I would say these are all women that are kind of outside the top five looking in. Maybe Marina Rodriguez being the exception there. Mackenzie Dern has been on the fringe of that. Obviously, we're seeing Angela Hill in a better career form lately. But I think that when we're looking at, how this fight measures up, right? She beat Angela Hill. That was a very close fight. Then we look on the other side. Virna Jandiroba, she's lost to a certain caliber of opponent as well. And it's basically been the women that are superior in the wrestling and grappling phase have been the people that have gotten the better of Virna Jandiroba to this point in her career. You look at Carla Esparza, a wrestler by trade, a former champion. You look at Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas, maybe a few of the only women in the division that would outrank her in terms of grappling credentials that have superior jiu-jitsu fundamentally. So this is a very interesting fight, right? On the other side, let's look at the win column for Virna Jandiroba. She is the more experienced professional, 20-3 as a pro in the UFC, just 6-3. So she doesn't have as many UFC fights, hasn't proven it on the ultimate proving ground as many times as Amanda Lemos, but still 3 losses, 6 victories, pretty similar record overall to Amanda Lemos. Then you look at Lupita Godinez, Marina Rodriguez, that's a common opponent between the two. Angela Hill, another common opponent between the two. Kanako Murata, I believe that was an armbar that broke her arm. And then she was, still trying to fight through it, but then eventually, realized that the arm was broken and that ended the fight. That's my memory of it. I'll have to go back and rewatch it. But obviously, that's the only TKO stoppage in her career. Otherwise, Virna Jandiroba is a sub or decision machine, and particularly the submission. That's been her calling card in the UFC. They've been harder to come by, obviously. But when you look back, Mallory Martin, she submitted her. That was a short notice opponent change. She was supposed to fight Livina Souza in that matchup. Then she fought Felice Herrig. She submitted her in the first round as well. They give her Mackenzie Dern. I mean, they weren't doing her many favors in terms of, setting her up for a career of success with grappling. Then they give her Kanako Murata, who's supposed to be a wrestler. And unfortunately, Murata ended up not having very much to offer on the feet. And it ended up being a more difficult fight than she expected. So then you look at the Amanda Ribas fight. Ribas is a woman that is clearly very talented in the grappling. She was able to compete with Mackenzie Dern in that phase as well. Then you see 3-fight win streak right now for Virna Jandiroba, but she did go out for a knee surgery, guys, before her last fight. And I believe she called off the Tatiana Suarez fight. Yeah, so Jandiroba was supposed to fight Tatiana Suarez. Then she had a knee injury. She got a knee surgery. And now she's coming back to this fight. So that's a little bit of background before we even get into this stylistic dynamic. Now, for me, when I first considered this fight, the way that I felt in my gut is Virna is probably sub or bust here. And the reason I felt that way is I feel like Amanda Lemos has a lot of power on the feet. I feel like she's the more physical woman of these two by a pretty considerable margin. And I just thought that over the course of 5 rounds in a small octagon, Amanda would probably be able to find Virna Jandiroba's chin, because I also think Virna slows down over the course of 3-round fights, typically speaking. And I feel like Amanda Lemos has shown now that she can fight 5 rounds. And even when the going got tough, I was kind of surprised that Zhang Weili was never able to find the finish there. I had the ends by sub. So I was really hoping one of those women was going to get the job done there. But instead, Zhang Weili, just a dominant decision. We've already seen the bounce back performance from Amanda Lemos there taking on Mackenzie Dern. And she was supposed to fight Tatiana Suarez. So it wasn't like she was ducking tough competition. She was willing to take on biggest names, toughest challenges in the division. Unfortunately, Tatiana Suarez unable, to make it to that fight. So then Mackenzie Dern steps up on short notice and, looked a little bit like a lamb to slaughter in that fight. So made it the distance there, but took a lot of damage, absorbed a lot in that fight. So for me, I feel like Amanda Lemos, dangerous fighter, talented fighter. I'm looking at the Virna Jandiroba side. And, she's a little bit younger, but not by a significant margin. Both these women are up there in their 30s. Virna would obviously be a new title challenger, a new, kind of fresh face in the division, so to speak. But I don't know exactly what, her marketing value is, how she translates. I think the same could be said of Amanda Lemos, but her highlight reel potential is typically a little bit higher. And her style is more that the UFC likes to market, right? Going out there, trading big shots on the feet, kill or be killed in some ways, right? She can be clipped on the chin, and she can clip others on the chin. She really badly hurt Angela Hill in that fight that went the distance. If you guys remember in the first round, I think it was a front kick to the face. So they've had, an opportunity to roll out a lot of, interesting footage on Amanda Lemos, and they set up some easy fights for her early in her career. I just look at the way they match made her and the way that they've match made Virna, and I don't know that they've done the same favors to Virna over the course of her career. Shout out to Pepe in the chat. One of the sharpest guys out says Lemos is kind of hard to get a read on. She's old, but a power outlier. I tend to agree. And you've got a woman here in Lemos who used to compete at 135. So clearly, she's a big woman and she had to transform her body in order to get the right body composition for 115 pounds. I think that shows a lot of dedication. And after the title fight against Mackenzie Durden, I still thought we saw a great product from Amanda Lemos, but I will revisit the tape and see if my memory does deceive me, because obviously we forget a lot about these fights after they happen. Shout out to our guy, Real Fight Pick, says, all right, Liam, let's get into it. No screwing off. That's true. That's what we're getting into today. Cowboy says female Bilal will not be denied. He says, gonna watch fully in the AM, but getting some in while my dog pukes up a waffle. Hey, them dogs be out there getting some. Virna's so slow and non-physical, hard to lay chalk on her here. I tend to agree with you. Lemos is the side, in my opinion, could get outed on the ground. In the stand-up, she's going to smoke Virna, says my guy, MMA line mover, friend of the show. Yeah, I tend to agree, right? So thinking about this fight conceptually, I think that plus money on either woman is fine, right? They're both a little bit older. They're both a little bit up there. WMMA model says take the plus money and hope for the best. And when you're looking at the Virna Jandiroba bullish case, I feel like there's two bullish cases that you can make for Virna Jandiroba in this fight. Number one, she just exposes her on the mat. Listen, I bet the plus 600 submission prop on Jessica Andrade, and it looked free 99, right? It looked like a girl in her first day of, jiu-jitsu class, right? And she got caught in that head and arm, and she started reaching out to the stars, and, it looked like she was in a horror film. The look on her face, and that was not a great look. But then we see her most recent fight where Zhang Weili is, beating her every which way but loose and, looking for position after position, and ultimately was not able to close the show on Amanda Lemos. So I feel like we've seen some growth from her. Maybe that could still be exposed though. So when I'm trying to put together the bullish case for Virna, it's for me, she gets an early sub. She just exposes her on the mat. And by the way, people always say, well, can she get the takedown? I mean, Jessica Andrade didn't take her down, right? She just kind of bullied her into the clinch in the apex against the fence and got the easy submission there. Bing, bang, boom. Thanks for playing. It was pretty quick. And by the way, it looked like Amanda Lemos was starting to get the better of Andrade on the feet, right? And so I had a lot of bets on Andrade. I had the -5.5. I had Andrade inside the distance. I had Andrade by submission there. And I was like, whoa. Like, she's starting to get lit up a little bit on the feet. Hopefully she takes it to the ground, uses that jiu-jitsu black belt, uses the fact she's been training in the gi recently and exposes this girl like I hoped. And that's exactly what she did. But, that's obviously Amanda's point of weakness, right? She knows that she needs to work on that. As for Virna Jandiroba, her one win via strikes, right? Her one win via TKO is an arm break. So I think that when you look at her body of work, her striking is serviceable insofar as it leads to the takedown, insofar as it leads to the grappling. But absent that, I'm not sure that she has the tools to really hurt, scare, bother Amanda, back her up, get her respect. So I think that Virna would need to win some kind of close decision, or I think she would need to, dominate with top control. Or she would need to get the submission. So those are the bullish paths, I guess, that you could paint for her. And I think close decision isn't really a bullish path, right? So the two bullish paths is dominant top control throughout, which I don't really see as super plausible personally, or the submission. And I do think the submission is very possible. So if I was thinking about the Virna Jandiroba side before props come out and all that stuff, I'd kind of just be interested in where the submission market opens up, the early submission props for Virna. Let's say submissions in round 1 through 3. And then on the opposite side, I'm thinking about Amanda Lemos potentially winning this fight via knockout. I think, with 5 rounds of opportunity in a small cage, it's either going to lead to grappling or it's going to lead to Amanda landing some big strikes, I feel. And on the opposite side, what is Amanda's case for, a really bullish decision? I guess it would be she stuffs all the takedowns. She keeps it upright. She dictates with the jab and the footwork, and just keeps it up on the feet. And honestly, I'm not sure that I see that either. I feel like there will be points in this fight where Amanda gives up a takedown or maybe gets put in a bad situation against the fence, unless she knocks her out very early. So I don't feel like I would be comfortable laying chalk on either woman here. I think there's enough red flags on both of them for Virna Jandiroba. I just don't think she's well-rounded enough. I don't think her striking is all there. I think it's a lot of winging overhands and hoping for the best, shooting in on takedowns from far away. And I think that for Amanda Lemos on the other side here, she's a dangerous, potent striker, but it's not like she can't, tire out a little bit over the course of her fights in her own right. And it's not like she hasn't been exposed one time before in comical fashion, right? Where she's like reaching up for the stars and doing the scary movie face. So I think that those are the things that caused me to be bullish on plus money here, right? It's an angle I'm constantly looking for, but frankly, I can't make bullish enough a case for one woman against the other. My lean here is towards Amanda Lemos. I think she's a little more marketable. I think at 37, she's still a little bit more athletically potent. The knee surgery for Virna worries me coming into this matchup. And Lupi's kind of a career underperformer. I feel like Amanda Lemos has performed up to the par. And as an underdog is when I've looked at back Amanda Lemos historically, right? I bet on her against Marina Rodriguez. I think it was 2.5 units at plus 200. And she went out there and absolutely smoked her like a salmon. So for me, that's enough of a bullish case to say, hey, dogger pass for me here. But I do agree that Virna needs to be taken seriously on the mat. I think that in a pure jiu-jitsu match, she would be very competitive, if not favored to beat Jessica Andrade. So for those reasons, it feels to me like a dogger pass situation and waiting for the props if I'm on the Virna side. And that's the way I see it, guys. So main event is in the books. If you guys are enjoying the chat, go ahead and drop a like on this video for me. I really appreciate the support. Continue to drop your comments in the chat here, and we will address them as we get going on the first look. I don't have a guest on the first look, except for the sharpest chat in the game. So I appreciate each and every one of you guys for helping make the show what it is. We got MMA Hedge Fund says, what's cracking, Liam? What a card we have here. This is where cappers earn their stripes. Brother, I am in need of a win here. So cheers to you. Let's get after it. I'm excited to get a win. He says, Lemos at plus money, got to be the side. Well, good to know we agree on that. Shout out to Aussie Fight Fan, says, what's up, Liam? And shout out to our guy, Glenbot, as well, says, good morning to Liam in the chat. Good morning to you, my brother, at 12:52 a.m. local time, just past midnight, but it's still a good morning here, brother. You know how we know it's a good morning? I got a coffee in my hand, and we're drinking it, and we're enjoying it. Peace, love, and chicken grease to each and every one of you guys. It's co-main event time here at UFC Vegas 94. So without further ado, we've got a fight that's going down in the middleweight division, guys. And it's the Iron Turtle, Yeong Park, against Brad Tavares. I don't know if Brad Tavares has a nickname. I got to check that out. Let's see if I got to give my guy Brad a nickname. No, he doesn't have one. Bam Bam Brad Tavares. How about that, right? I think Brian Barberena is no longer in the UFC, so we're going to borrow that, Brian, if you don't mind. We got Bam Bam Brad Tavares, and this is a fun one, guys. Is it a UFC co-main event? In my mind, not really, and that's no disrespect to either gentleman. I respect their work. I appreciate what they've done for the sport. Brad Tavares has been around a very long time. Yeong Park, a fun guy, always goes out there to put on a scrap. Puts on for grappling sometimes, puts on for boxing other times, goes out there, takes crazy knockouts, gives crazy finishes late in the fight as well. He's a fun guy, and on the Brad Tavares side, I mean, he's an anomaly. Sometimes Brad Tavares fights just make no sense, right? He's like one of the only guys. I think Sean Strickland did it as well. Maybe it's just something in the water at Extreme Couture, but basically nobody could survive, 2 3 rounds with Dricus du Plessis, right? Everybody was getting finished. Everybody's getting finished. Brad Tavares, I bet Dricus du Plessis plus money, plus 108. I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm all cool in the game, got a great position. Then I have the fight not to go the distance, similar price. And of course, the fight goes the distance, right? Brad Tavares, tougher than an old leather boot. But you're definitely seeing some chin regression from our guy, Brad Tavares. He got knocked out, by Robo. That's the end of that. We're done sneezing now. But he got knocked out by RoboCop, right? And that was his most recent fight. Prior to that, he beat Chris Weidman. And that was a fight where I had said right from Jump Street, I was like, man, what a terrible fight to give Chris Weidman. Like, it just felt like they were doing him absolutely no favors with that matchup, right? Brad Tavares is what? An elite anti-grappler. If Brad Tavares has been one thing throughout his entire UFC career, it is an elite anti-grappler. Want to know how I know? First of all, he's had 24 UFC fights, guys. He's not been submitted one time. 0 submission losses in 24 UFC fights, 0 submission wins, right? He's not going to look for his own submissions, but when you look at Brad Tavares, guys, he is a purely stand-up fighter, and most of the time he's doing points, right? He's like, I'm out here to land more punches than you over the course of the fight. However, he's not immune to the knockout. 2 wins by knockout in his career, 5 losses via knockout. And you may be saying to yourself, Liam, 5 losses via knockout, that's terrible. And it's not great. But what I think we can also acknowledge is when you have X amount of UFC fights, right? 24 UFC fights, where your game plan is to stand in front of the guy and strike, that, like, eventually you're going to get knocked out a bunch of times, right? Especially if it's middleweight, where it's 185 pounds. Now let's go through the Rolodex of guys that knocked him out. Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez, if I'm not mistaken, is on a 6-fight win streak. I'm definitely wrong about that. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He lost to Bruno Ferreira, but in his UFC career, he's 6-2. That's what I was thinking of. So 6-2 in the UFC, that's a quality loss. Then he loses to Bruno Silva. Not a great loss, right? Bruno Silva's 4-5, but you can give some context to some of those losses, right? Loses to Sharamagomedov. Sharamagomedov's being protected by the refs, the officials, everybody. He won that fight, but still not a great look. Then, you look at the other losses he had. He was wrong done in the Chris Weidman fight. They gave him Brendan Allen. That was a tough fight for him, and he almost knocked him out, by the way. And then he beat Brad Tavares. That's his only win in his last 6 fights. So that's a little bit concerning for Brad Tavares. However, it's still understandable. You get knocked out in the first round. It's a little bit of an early stoppage, but also, he was getting battered there. Then the du Plessis fight, right? He got beat up, but he was able to make it the distance. He was able to compete a little bit in that fight. So nothing to hang your head about there. That's the world champion. Beat Omari Akhmedov. Beat Antonio Carlos Jr. I bet on him in both those fights, guys. I think he was a small favorite in both of those. And the thing is, he's just not going to get taken down. He just doesn't get taken down. It's remarkable. Let's pull up UFC stats because I don't want to speak out of my tuchus. I want to give you guys straight facts and evidence, right? And what we've got here is a Brad Tavares who, over a really huge UFC sample size, like I said, 24 fights, he's got an 81% takedown defense rate. And Gregory Rodriguez took him down twice, right? He's a jiu-jitsu guy. He's very quality. Omari Akhmedov took him down twice. Antonio Carlos Jr. took him down 1 time. He outlanded both those guys by 20 strikes. 30 strikes. Like, he's making sure that he puts a little bit of a distance between himself and his opponents. He got taken down 3 times by Elias Theodoro, once by Caio Magalhães. These are way back in 2017, 2016. So basically, since 2016, the guys that, let's say since 2018, just for simplicity's sake, since 2018, he's given up 5 takedowns, and they were to Antonio Carlos Jr., he beat him, Omari Akhmedov, he beat him, and Gregory Rodriguez, who, that's a tough opponent, right? Gregory Rodriguez went out there and beat both these guys. So when you look at Jin Park on the other side, let's talk about his resume. 7-3 in the UFC. So does he have as much tenure? No. But is he a problem? Yeah, he has been a problem for a lot of guys. And his last fight, he lost a split decision to Andre Muniz. Not a great look, right? I can't remember the fight too well, so I don't want to speak too much on it. Let's go look at the stats for that fight. 11 takedowns for Andre Muniz to 0, 14 strikes to 27. So really gross fight from what it sounds like. Sounds like a real Andre Petrosky out there. And looking at this one, it's the fights previous, right? The Albert Duraev fight. Honestly, Duraev just looked like he didn't want to be in there from the jump. Didn't love to see that, right? The Dennis Talulian fight. Dennis Talulian has not been very impressive in the UFC. Joseph Holmes, same exact thing could be said. The Eric Anders fight, guys. I bet a lot of money on Jin Park that night. I think we got lucky there. That was a very close fight. I'd have to rewatch it to know, but that was a super close fight. And it's one of the times where it teaches you a lesson about laying the big chalk. Yeah, sometimes it wins, but you won't feel good about it. You will feel, a puckering of the highest order, as well as, a lot of discomfort, knowing that it could have easily went the other way. So a split decision at big chalk prices. I learned my lesson there a little bit about Jin Park. Is he a good fighter? Yes. Can he go out there and lose fights that he should win? Absolutely. Guys, from a stamina standpoint, he's a cardio guy. He's I'm going to go out there and push the pace. But if you damage him, like Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez, he slows down. And that's something that we want to take note of. In addition to that, when he goes out there, he typically wants to push that wrestling and that grappling game plan. Let's go ahead and look. He's got a 50% career takedown accuracy, but we saw Andre Muniz, who's a big physical guy, get 11 takedowns, right? Then you see Albert Duraev get the only takedown of their matchup. The guys he's taking down, Dennis Talulian, can't wrestle a lick. Joseph Holmes, not very physically strong at all. Eric Anders got the only 3 takedowns of the fight against him. Gregory Rodriguez got the only 2 takedowns of the fight against Jin Park before knocking him out in the second round. And it did look like Jin Park slowed down there. It looked like RoboCop was on the fritz. It looked like RoboCop could get knocked out. And then all of a sudden, RoboCop started throwing back, and Jin Park got tired, he got hurt, and he got finished. So it's something to keep in the back of our mind. Then he beats Tafan Nchukwi, who's not very high level. He beat John Phillips, who's not very good at all. And he beat Marc-Andre Barrio, who that's a pretty solid win. I'll give him that. But I still think that MAB just didn't know how to wrestle, and I think he had cycled off the good drugs at that point. So when I'm looking at this matchup, I like both these guys, but I think Jin Park is at his best when he can go out there and wrestle these guys. And I don't think he could wrestle Brad Tavares. So I think this is probably going to end up being a close stand-up fight, maybe like Muslim Salikov and Santiago Ponzinibbio. And if that ends up being the case, I just would not be surprised to see Brad Tavares get his hand raised here. Competitive fight. But for me, I got to really think about this one, because I could see Jin Park finding the chin of Brad Tavares. Brad is there to be hit, but I don't know. This is a tricky one. MMA Hedge Fund says, keep it between us, fellas, but make some money on that Tavares plus 3.5 point spread. That's hitting. This should be a pick 'em. I'm with Brad. Fair play. Glenbot says, after 14 years in the UFC, do you think Brad will regress more quickly? It's always possible, but I thought his, wrestling and grappling defense held up fine against Weidman and co. And honestly, I thought he just didn't finish Weidman out of a sense of like respect and decency, for a guy that came back from injury, because he could have kept smoking that leg. And at a certain point, it just seemed like he didn't want to. So respect. Younger power puncher, and you fade Brad big, but not Park. Yeah, fair play. I tend to totally agree with you. So Lulian somehow still in the UFC, says ST Crusader. What's the best resources to watch tape on upcoming fights? I would say Fight Pass, ESPN Plus, and YouTube are the 3 biggest for me. So yeah, you got it nailed on the head. And shout out to my guy Line Mover. He says the same thing. If it's pre-UFC, MMA Core, that also works. Interesting. Nice. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of great resources out there. This fight, I'm just seeing on Tapology, only 15% of the votes are on Tavares. It's not like Jin Park is a young man, right? He's 33 years of age. Brad is 36. He's not a spring chicken. Obviously in MMA miles, Jin Park, maybe a little bit less on the tank, but Brad's a bigger guy. He's a big middleweight. He trains in Vegas, pretty well situated, I feel like, for a fight like this. And I think this is a winnable fight for him. So I'm curious to see what this line ends up looking like. Shout out to our friends over at Fight Numbers. Let's pull up Fight Numbers, guys. I don't even have the odds pulled up because I just wanted to jump straight into the action this week. But without further ado, let's pull up the best odds that we can find here for these fights. And we'll give you the main event odds as well. So want to make sure we got you covered. And shout out to our friends over at Fight Numbers. Our guy, John Kelly, been putting together a great service over there. Respect what he's doing. And it's a great service. So there you have it. But in any case, guys, let's refer to these odds. We've got Amanda Lemos sitting at a plus 115 over on BetMGM and a minus 135 on Virna Jandiroba, the favorite at Caesars and DraftKings. Couple different sports books hanging the minus 135. FanDuel has moved off it to a minus 146. Now, as for this fight that we're talking about, we got Brad Tavares sitting at a plus 155 comeback on multiple sports books. You got a minus 180. Seems like the best available price over on Caesars Sportsbook. So that's an interesting note. And shout out to our guy, Glinbot, as well. In the chat says the under 2.5 in the Park fight is plus 170, which is interesting. I feel like that almost tells me it's going to be a close competitive decision, right? And if it's a close competitive decision, I probably want to have the plus money ticket on Tavares, but maybe Jeong Park can outwork him. I don't know how confident I feel in that. I think he's going to have a very hard time out muscling and out hustling Brad Tavares in the clinch. In any case, though, I love me some Iron Turtle. So happy to see these two guys getting a little bit of co-main event shine. But again, just don't know that if I was booking these cards, I would be putting these guys in the co-main event of the evening. But in any case, when the featured bout of the evening is Steve Garcia and Seung Choi, you start to understand it. And this is the next fight that we're going to be discussing, guys. So appreciate everybody for your comments here. If you've got comments here on this next fight, go ahead and start firing off because we've got Steve Garcia taking on Seung Choi. It's going down at 145 pounds. This is the featherweight division, and Steve, the Mean Machine Garcia, has had mixed results as a UFC favorite, right? Hasn't always gone his way, but in this 145-pound division, he's a big guy. He's actually coming in with a slight reach deficit in this fight, but typically his power has been what has carried him in the UFC. You look at his Bellator run, he had 3 wins via knockout. In the UFC, all 4 have come via knockout. So he has lived and died by the sword, right? He is 4-2 in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and he lost via knockout one time. He lost via decision against Luis Pena back in the day, put him in a body triangle the whole time. Steve Garcia was not excited about that outcome. Then you look at, the Charlie Ontiveros fight. I mean, I learned very little from that fight, except that you cannot trust Steve Garcia at heavy chalk, guys. I was like, Charlie Ontiveros should be a free win, right? You just have to get him to the ground, and it's going to be all over. And Steve Garcia was out there trading with him on the feet, almost got knocked out by Charlie Ontiveros, then eventually took it to the ground and finished the fight from the top position. But another one of those instances that taught me about the emotional toll of laying chalk, guys. Mahashate, right, went out there and just absolutely slept Steve Garcia with a right hand. That was a bad loss to take, a tough loss. I think that if they ran that fight a bunch of times, he could probably catch Mahashate a few times as well. But Mahashate was finally able to break back through into the win column in his most recent fight. So, hey, shout out to him. Then you look at the Chase Hooper fight. That one took me by surprise, right? Steve Garcia, big underdog, comes in there and just starches Chase Hooper. I mean, Chase honestly never had a chance in that fight to get going, right? It was just one of those fights where he got caught cold early and could never get on track. And that's tough, right? I think when I'm looking at this fight and how Steve Garcia is coming into it, right? The Shayilan Nurdenbeki fight. That's a nice win. But then you look at Shayilan and he just lost to Mel Costa as well. Another fight where he really struggled. He had the Derek Minner win. What does that really tell us? He had a TJ Brown win. What does that tell us? The Sean Soriano win. What does that tell us? Like Shayilan Nurdenbeki is still, an enigma. Where do you really place him? The Mel Costa knockout, that was sensational. That was a great win for Steve Garcia. But he's been hurt. He's been cracked. And his, record as a favorite is just not great, right? I think he was favored to beat Mahashate, if my memory serves. And like I said, he got served in that matchup. So shout out to our guy, Luke, says, don't love laying chalk on either side here. I agree with you, Luke. I can't lay chalk on either one of these guys. My gut instinct was that Steve was going to win. And then I see that basically everybody in the world thinks Steve was going to win. And here's the problem for me, right? I look on the other side, and Seung Choi has been favored all throughout his UFC run. So he's a guy that people have really believed in throughout the UFC run. And when he wasn't favored to win, it was against Movsar Evloev. I mean, fair enough, right? You could be an underdog in that kind of matchup. And I think there was one other time he was a dog. I'm trying to look at his UFC run. Against Yusuf Zalal, guys, he was a plus 200 underdog. So he's actually come through, in the underdog role before, and he's only been an underdog a handful of times across his UFC career. Now, that being said, he's underperformed expectations, right? He's been favored to win these fights and still lost them. So that's not a great look, but it does kind of show you when expectations are low, Seung Choi tends to do better. When expectations are high, he tends to do worse. He's 4-5 in the UFC. You have to presume that his job could always be at stake, but he is coming off a win. He beat Jarno Aarons, and Jarno Aarons just got his first UFC W. He lost to Mike Trezano, an experienced guy, a guy that I believe had won the Ultimate Fighter at that point. Josh Holobaugh, he lost a split decision there. That was a competitive one. Didn't go his way. And then I think Josh had hurt him in that fight as well, if my memory serves. The Caceres fight, guys, if my memory serves, Choi also hurt him. So he's got power. He's got an ability to hurt these guys, but sometimes he could just get, lost in the sauce. He can lose sight of the ball. I think the Alex Caceres fight's an example of that. And Caceres, one mistake and he can make you pay. He's got long limbs. He's got good chokes. So I think, this is an interesting question from Champ Bets. Do you think Choi can have grappling success here if he implements it? Now, that's hard to say. Steve Garcia, I got to go back and watch the tape to give you a better idea on this one. Let's just look at the record, right? He has one submission loss in his career. That was against Alan Cruz in the first round back in 2018. That's not a great loss, but Alan Cruz at the time, had a little bit more momentum. Looking back at that fight, he was coming off of a first-round win. So Alan Cruz, not a great loss to have. He lost to Ricky Tercios. He lost to Joe Warren. That's fair. Ricky Tercios loss is fair. The Luis Pena loss hasn't aged great, but that's all right. And the Mahashate loss, he got caught in the first round on the chin. So honestly, I don't know that I'd be confident that Steve Garcia will get out-grappled here, but I will refer back to the tape. I can't remember how much success Mel Costa had. I feel like he did have some success wrestling and grappling there, but he fatigued himself. So I wonder if Seung Choi will just try and compete with him on the feet, knowing that he could get knocked out. Steve Garcia, that is. And Seung Choi does have power. So it's interesting. Clinbot says sometimes when it's Steve, you have to trust the process and bet the under. Hey, fair play, brother. I think the safest way to play Garcia is scorecards, no action. Going to be dicey regardless because of his fight style, but great chin and finishing ability. Choi is the better overall fighter. Yeah, that seems like a fair assessment. It's interesting. Choi's had some success in the past, but, it just seems like he hadn't been the same guy recently in terms of the durability. I mean, Choi had Kulabau's back and Aaron's at the end of round 3 working with Korean Zombie now too. Interesting. That's an interesting note. So this is one where research is going to be my guide. But yeah, I can't stomach laying chalk with either one of these guys. That's probably going to be thematic for the card, but it is just how I feel about these matchups. Right now, my gut is with Steve, but there's a lot of red flags on it, and the trend is with Seung Choi. So I'll do a little bit more research before I come to a final conclusion on that one. And by Bets and Banter on Thursday, we'll have a much more ironed out opinion of that fight, guys. Next up, we've got Kurt Holobaugh taking on Kaynan Kruschewsky. Kaynan Kruschewsky got knocked out in absolutely brutal fashion by Elves Brenner in his last fight. So I have to wonder where his confidence is going to be at. He's taken about 8 months off. So I think that's an appropriate amount of time. He's 33 years of age, so he kind of needs to get back going. But I think he took the right amount of time off. On the other side here, you got Kurt Holobaugh. He's coming off a very one-sided loss to Trey Ogden. Prior to that, he had a decent little win streak going. Beat Austin Hubbard via finish. Beat Jason Knight via finish. Beat Lee Hammond via finish. And then beat Jose Luis Verdugo, Josary Boye. These are all finishes, right? So the guy is clearly a dangerous fighter. But then you look back when he was in the UFC prior in 2019, lost to Thiago Moises, lost to Shane Burgos, got finished in that fight via armbar in the first round. And then he also got uppercutted into Hades by Houndy Barcelos in the third round. So he really had a tough go of it. And when you look at his overall career, his losses have basically occurred mostly at the UFC level. He lost a handful of decisions back in the day. He lost to Pat Healy. He lost to Steven Seiler, and he's been cut, brought back, cut, brought back. He hasn't gotten that many UFC level wins. That's the problem, right? The ones I named before, Hubbard, Knight, Hammond, Des Green, those are basically all the UFC level wins he's gotten, and he's been fighting for a very long time, right? He's been fighting since 2008, Kurt Holobaugh. So with a 1-5 record in the UFC, I'm just not sure how I could project him, to do so well moving forward. And Trey Ogden absolutely blanketed him, just didn't let him fight. He basically held him down and dominated him. So that was a interesting look. And clearly he was very frustrated. Now for Kaynan Kruschewsky on the other side, he's got 9 wins by submission. And he did submit Dylan Mantello on the Contender Series, but I feel like he did some damage to him standing before that took place. Looking at the quality of his wins overall, it looks like he's beating guys with decent winning records recently, but he's overall fought a pretty weird level of competition, fought some guys with losing records after he had already built up a decent pro record. And then you look at Alexei Montiavi, knocked him out in the very first round. So we've seen 2 knockout losses in the very first round. As for Kurt Holobaugh, he's got a very diverse record of, finishes, right? He's got 7 wins by knockout, 10 wins by submission. He's only been finished twice, once by each method. It's decisions where it's cost him, right? 3 and 6 career to the decision. But he did get finished at the UFC level. I think that's important to note, right? He got decision losses early in his career. Andre Harrison, Magomed Kazbulaev, and his most recent loss, obviously. But Shane Burgos wasn't the most prolific finisher you've ever seen at the UFC level. And I think the same could be said of Hany Barcelos, for whatever that's worth. So looking at Shane's UFC record, he had 3 wins via finish, 5 wins via decision. Looking at the record of Hany Barcelos had 3 UFC stoppages and 3 UFC decisions. So fair play on Hany Barcelos. He has been proven to finish his wins as well. But in any case, I do think of a guy like Kurt Holobaugh as a dangerous guy. If you want to stand and trade with him, he's willing to take one to give one. He can land powerful strikes on the feet, and he did knock out Jason Knight, in brutal fashion. So he's shown that that's still a part of his arsenal. Hey, what? Don't you disrespect the legacy of Shane Burgos, brother? Because what I will tell you is Shane Burgos in the UFC did not have many wins via submission, right? Just the one against Holobaugh. But if you look at his pre-UFC career, going back to XFE, whatever, CFFC 42, he submitted Bill Algeo, slippery Bill Algeo. And by the way, Bill Algeo only has 2 sub losses in his career, one of them to the great and powerful Shane Burgos of Section 9. So had to do a little bit of Section 9 revisionist history for my boy. But shout out to our guy. Glenbot in the chat says, Kurt probably won't be able to tough out a choke. I love Holobaugh's game, but he got outed bad by Ogden. That was a rough matchup. I tend to agree. Trey Ogden laid and prayed. So as long as he fixed his grappling, he should be good. You can't fix your grappling at 37. He's a guy that does a lot of grappling in his fights offensively, right? So it's not like he doesn't know how to grapple. It's just that he's an offensive grappler, and I think positionally he does make some mistakes. Now, for Kaynan Kruschewsky, I don't remember much about this guy. Here's what I could tell you guys. I remember I picked him to beat Dylan Mantello on the Contender Series. So I did think that he was good enough to win that fight, and I did think he was going to probably get signed to the UFC. The Els Brenner fight, I don't remember what I thought was going to happen there. I don't think that I had any bets on the fight, but to see him get knocked out like that is definitely a tough look. I think of Kurt Holobaugh as a more experienced guy, a guy who's shown his work at a higher level. So there is a little bit of upside, I suppose, on Kaynan Kruschewsky in terms of the fact that he's a younger guy. He's a bigger guy. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. He's going to have a height advantage as well. He's 4 years younger than Kurt Holobaugh, but the experience gap is big here for Kurt Holobaugh. So unless I'm really impressed by this guy's top game and his ability to take people down and hold them down, I do think that Kaynan Kruschewsky might invite enough risk on the feet that he could be in danger of getting clipped and potentially getting finished as well. So interesting fight. I don't know what to make of this one. This is one where, again, going to have to let research be my guide. I always level with you guys, right? If I have a strong feeling, I'll let you know that. I don't have the strongest feeling here, but Kaynan Kruschewsky as the younger guy, maybe that makes sense that he's a favorite, but again, 60% favorite for a guy who's never won a UFC fight. Where's Dylan Mantello in the UFC? We don't know that. We haven't seen him tested at this level, so I think that's interesting to note. In fact, let's look at what Dylan Mantello's been up to, just out of curiosity, to see how the win has aged. He got a win over Nate Williams via flying knee knockout in the second round. So, hey, shout out to Dylan Mantello, getting back on track. I think he's a Longo guy, so always wishing well for Longo guys. New York, stay up. Next up, guys, we got Cody Durden taking on Bruno Silva. And this is, the battle of mid-age 33-year-olds, right? We got 33-year-old Cody Durden here taking on Bruno Silva, who's 34 years of age. And Bruno Silva has had a pretty tough run as an underdog in the UFC. If you look at his record, he was an underdog against JP Buys, and he got the win in that matchup. So shockingly, he was a dog against Buys, right? But if you look back at his career prior to that, he had definitely struggled as an underdog. Losing to Tagiru Lambekov, losing to David Dvorak. And he was an underdog in both of those matchups. So then we look forward. He beats Tyson Nam. That was a fine win, an impressive win, some would say. He beat Victor Rodriguez. That win, I don't really know how much to make of it. He had a lot more experience than Victor Rodriguez. I'm not sure that Victor Rodriguez is going to get any wins at the UFC level. I'm not sure that he's still signed to the promotion. But in any case, I'm looking at, a Bruno Silva who definitely looked improved when he showed up with the Neuroforce 1 and the Fight Ready and Henry Cejudo. And it looked like he had made some improvements to his hardware, so to speak. And he came back with a lot of panache, a lot of fire, definitely some power in his hands and ability to go out there and get submissions. And that's what makes this an interesting fight, because on the other side, Cody Durden is definitely a technical wrestler. He's solid. He's fought tough competition in the UFC. But the thing that's bitten him on a number of occasions is the submission defense. And we know that Bruno Silva is a dangerous guy. He's got 4 wins by submission, just 1 loss via submission. And that was back in, his regional days. He got submitted as well on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil back in 2015. So he's not immune to the submission in his own right. But he's got a couple of submission wins on his resume, including his most recent fight against Tyson Nam. I believe that was a club and sub type scenario, but I'd have to revisit the fight. But in any case, Bruno's shown some improvements, right? And he's also shown the power in his hands. Cody Durden has gotten submitted a few times, right? If you look at his record, he's never been stopped with strikes, and that's impressive. However, he did get virtually knocked out against Mohammad Makayev. He got blasted with a knee, and it set up the choke, fundamentally, right? So that's more of a club and sub scenario. Now, as for Jimmy Flick, he literally just jumped into a flying triangle. That was awesome. And Tagiru Lambekov just was a little bit sharper in the wrestling, a little bit sharper in the grappling. He was able to get the win there. But the things that are concerning is the fact that he had also been submitted regionally by Ryan Hollis. So it's been a continual lapse in his game, right? He's been submitted via rear naked choke on the amateur scene in 2014. He got submitted via rear naked choke in 2018 as a pro. He got submitted via flying triangle in 2020 as a pro. He got submitted via guillotine choke, as a professional. And then he got submitted most recently in December, again, by a high-level opponent. But you just see a common theme, right? He's getting submitted in a lot of these losses. And so you have to wonder, what can Bruno Silva bring to the table in terms of his submissions, in terms of his club and sub ability? If he's able to get after that, he could present some problems. On the other side of things, if this fight sees the scorecards, you have to imagine Cody Durden should be favored in that kind of fight. Why? He's been a proven decision winner, right? 5-1 in fights that go the distance. The fight that he lost via decision was all the way back in the NFC against Jared Scoggins, a talented opponent, by the way. That was back in 2017. Since then, he's gone 5-0 career to the decision, as if my memory serves. No, excuse me. He had 1 decision before that fight. So 4-0 career to the decision ever since then. Now, if you look at Bruno Silva, right, and you had to criticize a point of failure in his career or a point of emphasis for his opponents, he's a guy that's 4-3 career to the decision, right? 2 of his losses in the UFC are via decision. So that's definitely a problem, right? David Dvorak, a guy that has had problems at times winning UFC level decisions, right? He's 2-3 career to the decision in the UFC. One of the guys he was able to get the jump on was Bruno Silva back in 2020. Tagiru Lambekov, who finished Cody Durden, was able to get the decision win over Bruno Silva. So in terms of my research process, to let you guys in on how I'm thinking about this, I'm going to rewatch the common opponent here as my first look, right? Tagiru Lambekov. See how they both performed against him. See why things unraveled for Cody Durden. And if Bruno Silva could take advantage of that, or if Bruno Silva, got audited in the same ways, but he just didn't get finished. That's what I have to find out. That's what I want to explore here. But for me, the JP buys and Victor Rodriguez wins, I almost want to throw those out of the sample, right? I respect Tyson Nam. I respect the Tagiru Lambekov. I respect David Dvorak as tough guys that can win UFC level fights. So I want to give them that credit. I think of Cody Durden the same way, right? When you go out there and beat Jake Hadley, Charles Johnson, Carlos Moda, JP buys in the first round via knockout, you tell me, all right, this guy can go out here and win real fights, right? Serious fighter. So for me, my gut says that Cody Durden, if he doesn't get finished in this fight, he's going to find a way to eke it out on the scorecards. He's a gamer. He goes out there to push that wrestling and grappling pace. He wants to wrestle and grapple with everybody. The thing is, against the best guys, they just find a way to out-position him, out-savvy him. So I have to study the grappling of Bruno Silva and see, hey, can he, put Cody in these compromised positions? If not, he's going to have to rely on his hands. He's going to have to rely on his sprawl and brawl, his ability to keep the fight upright. And pulling up our information according to UFC stats, Bruno Silva just a 59%, a 64% takedown defense rate, right? Cody Durden's averaging almost 5 takedowns per 15 minutes, 4.8 compared to just 2.6 for our guy Bruno Silva. And Cody Durden, guys, is much bigger. He's going to stand 5'7" compared to 5'4" for Bruno Silva. He's going to have a 67-inch reach compared to 65 inches for Bruno Silva. He's going to be fighting out of the southpaw stance. So I'm going to want to see how Bruno Silva has dealt with these southpaws over time. But when you look back, guys, I'll just tell you this. Bruno Silva's got a negative striking differential. It's small, minus 0.04. But Cody Durden has a positive striking differential. So it just seems to me like he's going out there, with a better game plan to win fights over 15 minutes. But I do think there's some danger in terms of Cody Durden has proven he could get finished, So shout out to the sharp comments and chat in here. Anakin Skywalker says, does the small cage favor Silva or Durden? Tough question. I would have to say Durden, because if he's going to be pursuing takedowns, I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunity for him. Glenbot says, generally the small cage favors proactive grapplers and come forward strikers in lower weight classes. It depends on the matchup. Fair play. I dislike Durden too much to have an opinion on this fight. Fair enough. I think Durden is able to get the takedowns and win like that, says Champ Bet. Shout out to you for that. Are there any stats for the Apex we should consider when making picks? Good question. Something to look into. I think I have a couple documents saved on X. So that's a great point by you. Silva hasn't won a decision since 2018. Think Cody's good here for basically even. Yeah, fair play. The numbers agree with you. Durden plus 120 to win by decision. Silva plus 200 to win by decision. Fair enough. Mash the like button. Liam's not getting the love he deserves. Hey, thank you, Primary Pythons. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who's rocking with us, supporting the show, tuning in. Thank you guys so much for the support. Everybody that is here, everybody that has dropped a like. If you haven't yet, if you don't mind making the time, I really appreciate the support. But if it's too much of a burden, no problem. All I ask, think about subscribing to the channel. Think about supporting the show in any way you can. You could also share it on social media. Any little thing helps. But that being said, guys, we'll move along from this one. My lean is Cody Durden, but I'm going to do a little more due diligence, obviously, before I have a final opinion there. I got respect for Bruno Silva. I think he's shown a better product in recent years, but I think Cody Durden is a very serious guy, and, it's going to take a special effort to beat him right now. So we've got Choi taking on Bill Algeo in the next fight. And these are guys that have both struggled against Kyle Nelson, right? The monster, Kyle Nelson, went out there and drew with Choi. I thought Kyle Nelson had a very strong argument for winning that fight. Close fight. He did get hurt in that fight as well. But I thought he probably had a better argument to win it. Now against Bill Algeo, I think it was a fair stoppage, but let's be clear, right? I think that Bill Algeo got stopped in a way that, a lot of fights don't get stopped. So there's not consistency in how fights are stopped. I think that for the sake of Bill Algeo's health, because he's a family man, just to get him home to his kids, there's nothing wrong with stopping a fight early, right? But in terms of what the fighters want, in terms of what people are willing to accept in championship fights or all these things, to see that fight stopped, it's just an example of the inconsistencies we see in MMA. If you guys remember that fight, it was a huge controversy at the time, the stoppage. So for Bill Algeo, he's obviously going to be looking to bounce back. But here's the thing. He's been getting clipped, hurt, rocked, wobbled more in his fights, over time. And he's always been a guy that's, kind of there to be hit, right? He exchanges. He's had these crazy fights. He's been finished via submission against Dean Lavin back in the day in 2012. He's been fighting forever. He got finished by Shane Burgos, like I mentioned, back in 2014. He's now a BJJ black belt, if my memory serves. He's a very talented guy, 5-4 in the UFC. But you look at his wins. He beat Alexander Hernandez and TJ Brown, which I don't read too much into. But the wins that are really quality, Joanderson Brito, right? I think that was a UFC debut for Brito, but that was an impressive win nonetheless. Tough guy, out physical, and he still managed to find a way to win. He was very agile. He was able to be quick. He was able to be nimble. But when he gets hurt, he does lose his legs a little bit, and that's a bit of a concern. Looking at that last fight, he really had a hard time recovering. There was a couple of shots in between when he first got dropped. And I do think Kyle Nelson might have slowed down over the course of 15 minutes. But what I didn't see was a Bill Algeo responding great to getting hurt. He wasn't attempting, a lot of takedowns or trying to clinch up. He was mostly just fleeing backwards and evading and, stumbling all over the place on his legs. And that was a bad look for me. I think Doo Ho Choi is going to be willing to go in there and crack. Going to be willing to go in there and throw hands. He's 11-2 career to the knockout. I don't love his recent win-loss record, but you have to remember, guys, he's on a bad run in 2019, comes back after a long layoff in 2023. Now he's getting a turnaround here after another year outside the octagon to have some time to recover, some time to figure out, hey, what went wrong last time? What can I improve? What can I try and fix? I do think Bill Algeo has been way more active. He's been fighting, tough guys. He's been in there recently. You look at his level of activity in 2023, he had 2 fights. He had 1 fight already this year. My concern for Bill is that, he just got stopped in the first round and he's coming back, he's coming back pretty quick, right? So a few months later, right? 4 months later, and he's right back in the octagon. And you can say whatever you want about early stoppage, this and that. I think he probably got concussed there. So he's getting back in, and Doo Ho Choi is going to try and test that, brain matter, right? He's 33 years of age. He's the younger guy in this matchup. Bill Algeo is a little bit taller, a little bit longer. But, I do think that what we saw last time from Bill is a reminder that he could get clipped on the chin and he can make some mistakes out there. So as talented as he is, he's far from a perfect fighter. And he's, he was last time favored to win like -250. I think this time he's favored to win about -160. I'll go over and check the odds here for this fight. We got a -175. -165 seems like the best available prices. And then on the other side, the comeback on Doo Ho Choi at about +145. So I think on activity, you make Bill Algeo a small favorite here, but I definitely would be interested in the early KO props for Doo Ho Choi. I think that Doo Ho Choi does not have great cardio. I don't know that he can last long into this fight. But I think that in the early going, he could clip Bill Algeo and hurt him. After a nice sip of the coffee, let's take a look and see what the trend is on our friend Bill Algeo. So yeah, guys, Bill Algeo has typically been an underdog in the UFC. He was a favorite against TJ Brown. He was a favorite against Herbert Burns. He was a favorite against Kyle Nelson. Obviously, we saw how that one turned out. He was favored to beat Ricardo Ramos. We saw how that turned out. Guys, he was a dog against Joanderson Brito, which was a win. Impressive one, nonetheless. He beat Spike Carlisle as a dog. Impressive. He beat Alexander Hernandez as a dog. Impressive. But he lost to Andre Fili as a slight underdog. He lost to Ricardo Lamas as a big underdog, and he lost to Brendan Loughnane as an underdog. So all around the board, Bill Algeo has, basically been a great underdog, and he's really struggled as a favorite. So for me, I'd be more interested in the Duho Choi upside of, hey, he could come in here, knock him out, clip him, he's a dog. Then I really would be with laying it with Bill Algeo. When last time out, one of the things that had always been a calling card, his durability, his ability to go out there and weather an early storm, that kind of let him down and failed him in that fight. He's only been stopped once with strikes. Eventually, you have enough fights, it's going to happen to everybody. But I don't want to be holding the ticket at minus 175 if it happens again. So shout out to Glenbot, says the under 2.5 in the Bill fight is plus 130. That's an interesting look. I'm not sure how committed he is as a finisher. He did go to decision with Alexander Hernandez and Joe Anderson Brito, as well as Spike Carlisle. But those are all tough guys to finish. So maybe you have something there. Maybe he can go out there and finish the likes of Duho Choi. But looking at Duho Choi's record, he's 2-2 career to the decision. So it's not like he's been prolific in that realm. He's never been submitted, and he is 11-2 career to the knockout. So I do think Bill Algeo could be the first guy to submit him. I don't know how much he's been tested on the mat, but I definitely think Bill Algeo, after that last fight, might be like, yo, I do not need to be exchanging with these guys anymore. I'm going back to trying to wrestle this guy, grab a hold of him, pick him up, slam him to the ground. And I do think that Bill Algeo is a good grappler. Once he gets on top, once he puts that body triangle in, he can be very smothering, right? He can really suck the wind out of people. So whether or not he's more talented than you at jiu-jitsu, he'll just start, grabbing a cross wrist, punching you in the ribs a bunch of times, and then trying to choke you. And I think Duho Choi, if he's put in those situations, will not appreciate that. So I do kind of like the violence angle here as well. That's an interesting look for me. And I think that's why the UFC would put this kind of fight together, I feel. Let's get some fun action. Let's kick off the main card right with two guys that know how to go out there and put on a fun fight. Next up, guys, we've got the prelim headliner. This one's Hyder Amil, the undefeated fighter from the El Nino Training Center, Gilbert Melendez's outfit. He's taking on Yeong Lee. And I wish my guy MMA Line Mover was live on the air with me right now, because he had a huge bet on Yeong Lee last time out against Blake Builder. I think the Blake Builder fade long-term is probably sound, but that was a great spot, and it was a really sharp bet in hindsight, right? Last time out, Hyder Amil was also pretty heavily favored in his UFC debut against Fernie Garcia, and he showed that was absolutely justified, going out there and pounding a hole through the head of Fernie Garcia via knockout in the second round. And keep in mind, Fernie Garcia fought Rinya Nakamura. He fought Brady Heaston. He fought Journey Newsom. The one thing that they all had in common, they didn't finish this guy. Right? And you had seen he had 4 losses via decision. He had never been finished in professional mixed martial arts. He got finished by Hyder Amil, and Hyder Amil got 5 wins by knockout, 1 win via submission. He went to decision on the Contender Series against Enver Sanmez. So he's kind of showed he's got a variety of different ways to win the fight. He beat Chase Gibson, who was a quality regional win at the time, Devontae Sewell. He beat Sanmez, like I mentioned, and Fernie Garcia. So is there a standout win in the bunch? I can't say that there is. But he's gone out there and done the job he's supposed to do so far. And he's done things other people have struggled to do, like go out there and get the finish over Fernie Garcia, who had not been finished. But now we kick it over to Yeong Lee, the Korean Tiger, says my guy Champ Betts. So shout out to the Korean Tiger, Yeong Lee, who beat Yisa, and he beat Blake Builder in UFC level competition. Yisa was a split decision over a 22-3 fighter, so somebody way more experienced than him. He got the win there. Now he's fighting somebody with less experience than him in Hyder Amil, for whatever it's worth. He also beat Blake Builder, who had less experience than him, just 10 professional fights coming into that one. So now you look at his quality of work, his brand of work. He has only lost 1 fight ever. That was to 6-3 Seung Kim. And at the time, he was just 3-0 as a professional. That was back in 2017. So I'm sure he's made huge strides since then in terms of his training. He's on an 8-fight win streak heading into this bout. And I'm looking for his social media profiles. So Korean Tiger, that is what I'm looking for. Here we go. And right now, guys, it looks like he's training at Fight Ready in Arizona, putting in work with the great Eddie Cha. And it looks like a variety of training partners. So seems like he's done his work in the US to make this acclimation process a little bit easier. He did fight in the Apex Center last time as well. So now we've got some information on his training and his situation. We talked about Hyder Amil training out of the El Nino Training Center. He's a little bit more advanced in age, right? He's 34 years of age. He's on a 10-fight winning streak. That dates back to his amateur career. So both of these guys have experienced a lot of winning. Both of these guys have a lot of momentum riding into this bout. However, the difference is one guy's 28 years of age. He's a little bit bigger and taller. I'm talking, of course, about Yeong Lee. He's 28 compared to 34. He's 5'10" compared to 5'9". He's got a 73-inch reach compared to a 70-inch reach. For me, the thing that makes Hyder Amil interesting is, number one, his only loss on his record was on the amateur scene back in the California amateur. So let me pull up ShareDog and see if we can get confirmation on this. Man, I can't find his other amateur fight that he lost. Shit. If anybody knows the results of that Tito Mendoza fight, please let me know. Please let me know that. But in any case, right, I'm not sure that Hyder Amil has been finished, right? And if he hasn't been finished, I mean, man, he's a tough guy, right? He goes out there, he creates a storm. He really throws wild. He takes a lot of risks. And if my memory serves, he can be put in some difficult situations in his fights and has persevered and then come back and found a way to win. A lot of people expected him to beat Fernie Garcia. So, no skin off his nose there. He was favored as well to beat Emre Sanmez. So he's gotten a pretty easy push to this point. This is going to be where he meets some real resistance in Yeong Lee. I always worry, when you have fighters come in and I haven't seen them grapple UFC level opponents at a high level, that always makes me worry. So I do think that's where you could see Yeong Lee potentially run into some trouble with Hyder Amil. Hyder Amil throws way more volume. Okay, so in his UFC fights, he's throwing 4.7 significant strikes per minute, absorbing 2.1. And then on the other side, you've got Yeong Lee, very clean, right? 2.8 landed, 1.5 absorbed. However, that's just not as much volume, right? So he's limiting volume a little bit better. Hyder Amil's taking a little bit more risk, but overall, he's throwing more volume. He's a switch stance fighter. He throws and brings a lot of pressure, and neither one of these guys has a lot of takedowns in their fights. Right. Obviously, the finish over Fernie Garcia didn't necessarily give him all that much time in the world to pursue it. Right. He finished him early on enough. But in that fight, Hyder Amil did have a takedown attempt. He did have multiple submission attempts against Fernie as well. He was just trying to finish him by any means necessary, showing a lot of good finishing instincts. Against Emre Sanmez, Emre got 5 takedowns on him. It was a very close fight. But Hyder Amil, again, showed off that submission attempt, right? Went after the submissions. He's not afraid to look for them, and that's important to note coming into this fight. And then on the other side, Yeong Lee, he got 2 takedowns against Blake Builder and shut him out on the feet. But again, that didn't tell me much. He got taken down 5 times against Yiza and only outlanded him by 1 significant strike. That doesn't tell me much. He got the knockout on Road to UFC. He got the submission on Road to UFC. Those are both brilliant, fine wins. First round, easy finishes, no skin off your nose. But I'm looking at a guy in Yeong Lee who just hasn't separated himself very much yet. He's done what he's been asked to do. But I still think that there's a little bit more I want to see from this guy, to know he's the truth. I think he's got real skills and abilities, but I think that he definitely is going to be tested in this fight. You're seeing a plus 175 as a comeback on Hyder Amil compared to a minus 210, minus 190 at best on DraftKings for Yeong Lee. And I think that this is no Blake Builder. That's just the difference I'll draw here. And it's not like Blake is a bad fighter, per se. I just think that Blake Builder, when I'm looking at his record, right, Kyle Nelson was able to shut him out of the fight. His win in the UFC is over Shane Young. It was a competitive decision. And for me, that just told me everything I needed to know. Shane Young, no longer with the promotion, not really a UFC level guy, in my opinion. Shout out to my guy Line Mover, though, who is a very sharp guy, says Yiza is a legit grappler, in my opinion. Fair play. But he also says, hashtag always fade Blake Builder. Fair enough. Lead decision in the over 2.5 is Pick'em, which is interesting. Two durable guys have not been finished. Listen, I think Hyder Amil is a dangerous guy, but he invites risk, right? That means pro and against. He can go out there and hurt this guy. He can knock him out. He could get the submission. He could also put himself in a lot of danger by being so aggressive, by pursuing so much. And his opponent has shown, if you look at Yeong Lee's record, he's got 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, a 4-1, very respectable record to the decision. So he's a balanced fighter, well-rounded, capable in all positions. As for Hyder Amil, same thing is true. Only 1-0 career to the submission. But like I mentioned, he's attempted a lot of subs in a short UFC career. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to work on that element of his game, continue to see him show that off. So, yeah, I think this is a fascinating, well-matched fight, and I would just line it a little bit closer. I'm going to do my tape and due diligence as always, come back to you guys with an ironed-out opinion. But for me, I just respect a guy like Hyder Amil and what he's been able to accomplish. First of all, he's been favored his last 2 fights. So people had a lot of high hopes for him, and now he's a big dog coming in against an opponent in Yong Lee. And the other thing is, this guy just brings a pace of pressure, a kind of uncomfortable guy to fight. And, it's always tough to say, right? But in a lot of these fights, skills matter, but also like how somebody feels matter, right? There's a lot of guys that are really skilled, but you start to put them under pressure, you start to make them doubt themselves, and they make huge mistakes and they underperform expectations. And that's the one thing I wonder about Yeong Lee in this fight is what is going to happen when Hyder Amil starts bringing crazy pressure, getting in his face, throwing wild? Is he going to clip him and finish him? Is he going to have the tools to shut him out of the fight, or is Hyder Amil going to make this a dog fight because he's proven in his fights that he's very good at that, and he's willing to go to dark places to get the win. So shout out to him. Shout out to the El Nino Training Center. That's a scrap pack, as y'all know, and Gilbert Melendez, a guy that you want to learn from if you're trying to be a high-level fighter in the lighter weight classes. Shout out to Precision Picks in the chat. Says, Amil pushes pace but fades late. Yeah, that's fair. I feel like he gets finished early or he gets finished late. Yeah, I don't hate that look because he fights like a suicide pace, and it's a good day to die. Excuse me. Trying to get to Hyder plus 3.5, but small concern on his reckless tendencies. Yeah, he kind of, like I said, he invites risk. So that sets up finishing opportunities for both fighters, not just the guy that you're looking at back. The iced coffee is just hitting different today, folks. We are locked in. We are absolutely dialed. And the next fight of the night, I have already sent information about this fight on Patreon because this instantly just jumped into my brain, right? I'm a person that has some pattern recognition. That's one of the things that I try and bring to the table in terms of my skill set, in terms of how I break down these fights. And from a pattern recognition standpoint, it doesn't take a genius. It doesn't take a, Johnny Sophisticato to come up with the idea that Cody Gibson's been submitted in 4 of his professional losses, right? He's 4-4 career to the sub. Not a great record, but I just think it's interesting that both of these guys have been very susceptible to the submission, right? You look at a guy in Cody Gibson, like I mentioned, 4-4 career to the subs. That makes up 40% of his career losses. He's lost 6 times via decision. He's lost 4 times via submission. As for Brian Boom Kelleher, he's won 10 times via submission. He's lost 8 times via submission. So he's a guy that's been live and die by the sword with that submission, right? His 2 most recent losses in the UFC prior to the Cody Garbrandt knockout were Umar Nurmagomedov by sub in round 1 and Mario Bautista by sub in round 1. The rear naked choke has been a constant boon in the career of Brian Boom Kelleher. However, on the other side, not only has Cody Gibson been submitted 4 times in his career, guys, he's been submitted 3 times via guillotine choke. Now, if you guys have watched a lot of Kelleher footage, you'll know exactly what I'm about to say next, which is Brian Kelleher tends to be very talented at the guillotine choke. That's one of his specialties. That's one of his primary maneuvers that he's always going for in his fights. So obviously, Cody Gibson isn't just an easy mark to be out-grappled because he has fought the likes of Aljamain Sterling and not gotten submitted, right? He fought Douglas Silva de Andrade. He lost the fight, didn't get submitted. He fought Ray Borg, lost the fight, didn't get submitted. Fought Brad Katona, can't finish a sandwich. He fought Miles Johns, doesn't want to finish a fight. So when I'm looking at this matchup, right, I think about what Cody brings to the table. And, I see him as a guy that has been really struggling at the UFC level. He's 1-5 at the UFC level. Not good. His wins on the Ultimate Fighter, Mando Gutierrez, that was the guy that was brought in to lose to Raul Rosas Jr. when he was still just 17 years of age, right? That kind of tells you where he was at. He got brutally finished by Cam Smotherman as well. So no hate, no disrespect to the guy, but just calling it like I see it, right? I'm not sure, what that win really tells us. And then the Ricky Desculio win via arm triangle in round 1. I mean, that tells me nothing. The Cisco Rivera win, fine, but 15-9, again, doesn't tell me very much. The John Dodson win is arguably his best win in XMMA. So shout out to Cody Gibson for that. He beat Louis Sanadukis, cool guy, good guy, and a guy that's been putting together some wins lately. So at the time, Cody had way more experience than him. But since that fight, Louis gotten 2 nice wins under his belt, including a finish, his most recent fight. So shout out to our guy, Louis. Hope to see him in the UFC. He's a cool guy. Interacted with him on Twitter a little bit. So would love to see him succeed. But the bottom line is, guys, he lost to Adrian Diaz. It was a 3rd-round guillotine choke. Problem, right? Manny Gamburian, 2nd-round guillotine choke. Problem. Ulysses Gomez, 3rd-round guillotine choke. Problem. So he's just been getting submitted with guillotine chokes when he gets beat, right? And Brian Boom Kelleher, I think he's got 7 career wins by submission. So when you're talking about a guy whose career is on the line and you look at his UFC wins, right? Let's talk about Brian Kelleher's UFC finishes. His UFC finishes are as follows. Ray Rodriguez, guillotine round 1. Hunter Azure, left hook and hammer fist in round 2. So shout out to Brian. Nobody expected him to knock out Hunter Azure. Ode Osborne, guillotine in round 1. And then he beat Damian Stasiak via punches in round 3 way back in the day. And Yuri Alcantara via guillotine choke in round 1. He beat Julio Arce in the ring of combat via guillotine choke in round 3. Guys, those are good wins. I look back and Julio Arce, guys, has been submitted 1 time in his career. It was against Brian Boom Kelleher via guillotine choke. Okay? Then you look back, Yuri Alcantara. Yuri Alcantara was a good fighter, guys. He's been submitted twice in his career. 14-2 career to the submission is Yuri Alcantara. All right? So put a little respect on our guy, Brian Boom Kelleher's name in this guillotine choke. So for me, listen, if this fight gets extended, Brian's not going to win it, right? He just hasn't been doing very well in extended fights recently. What it would take is him out wrestling and out grappling Cody Gibson. He's 500 in the UFC, Brian Kelleher, and Cody Gibson is 1-6. So in terms of the win-loss record, I mean, Brian Kelleher clearly the better overall body of work in the UFC. I don't think that's even debatable. Then you look at the recent wins. Kevin Kroom doesn't tell you much. Domingo Pilarte doesn't tell you much. But he can go out there and wrestle and grapple if he can get on top of these guys for 15 minutes and win the fight. That's what he showed in those ones. Against Ray Rodriguez, he guillotined him early. Hunter Azure guillotined him early. Losing to Cody Stamen, Ricky Simone, Umar Nurmagomedov, Mario Bautista, even Cody Garbrandt. I don't know how much that really tells us when he's taking on a guy like Cody Gibson. Honestly, I don't think it tells us very much of anything. So for me, I like and respect Brian Kelleher, and I think that he's probably going to get, his walking papers if he loses his fight. So whatever Brian has left, he's had a lot of surgeries. He's had a lot of injuries. He's had tough times. But I do think that Brian is going to sell out for his win. He's going to try by any means necessary to keep that UFC contract. So I think that if you could get the exacta method on Brian Boom Kelleher by submission, guillotine choke, that is what I would look for here. Because I think that's probably how he has to win it. But I'm telling you, like Brian Kelleher, right now, he's got the way better body of work than this guy. So if the neck surgery ended his career, sucks to see, but that's fighting. You get it. You understand it. But again, losing to Cody Garbrandt, losing to Mario Bautista and Umar Nurmagomedov, which one of those guys is Cody Gibson favored against? I don't think any of them personally. So I agree with my guy Champ Betts. He says motivation is all-time high for Brian. I agree. I never totally lock in this early. I like Bruno, DHC, Lemos KO. I think you mean not Lemon KO. Maverick, Bruno KO, Ogden Kurt KO. Shout out to MetaHuman Project for your thoughts, brother. He thinks it's one of the best betting cards of the year. Haunter says it's so low level, anything can happen in some of these fights. Yeah, I tend to agree. This card might be the worst of the year. That's a fair point. Those Gillies were a long time ago too. I wonder how much he's improved and caught on. Yeah, I think matchups are also a big part of it, right? How many other guys have been guillotine specialists that he's fought since then? I think that's something to consider. You have to be crazy to take Cody minus 220. I agree. Lemon KO play of the week. I'm with Haunter. I want to lock that one in. When life gives you lemons, you bet lemon KO. That's an old proverb. All right, guys, next up. Also, I should just disclose, bias this shit, right? Brian Kelleher is a New York guy. We love to see him do well. So I'm a fan of Brian outside of everything. But I'll also give you guys the honest betting analysis as I see it. And both these guys are old, right? Both these guys are a little bit washy. But I do think Brian has the better resume overall. And I think that when you look at Brian's losses, they're forgivable. You look at the losses for Gibson, and they're mostly just getting stalled out in decisions. And he doesn't look very athletically impressive to me anytime when I see him fight. And I'm not saying Brian's a killer athlete, but he has overperformed expectations, right? He's beaten real guys in the UFC. So that's just the way I see it. Then you see, oh, wow. Brian Kelleher trains with the great Pat Shigoli as well, says MMA line mover. I won't call him the great Pat Shigoli personally. I think he's a very talented competitor, but don't like his attitude, man. Don't like the way he's hurting people and shit. Pretty classless in my view. In any case, we got next up, guys, a prelim fight. We got Miranda Maverick taking on Dione Barbosa. And this is a fight where Miranda Maverick is, the favorite to win this one, right? She's coming in minus 200 or so. She's taking on Dione Barbosa, 32 years of age. And I got to be frank with you guys, right? She got the win over Ernesta Carrasquete. She beat a very overmatched Rain Guerrero. If you guys saw that fight, that was a comedy. But she did lose back in the day to Jenna Bishop. She got knocked out by Josiane Nunes. She has a win over Karine Silva, which obviously has aged very well. Karine Silva currently on a fantastic run in the UFC, but at the time, she was also losing to Marina Mokhtanian, Marina Moroz. She was getting finished by the likes of them. So maybe she found a new doctor. Maybe she found a new coach. I don't know what happened to change the life of Karine Silva. Maybe she just got older. But for me, I think of, the Ernesta Carrasquete girl as somebody that really does not have the wrestling and grappling to write home about, right? She was able to stuff the attempts of Carly Judice. But, I think that overall, that was just a very winnable matchup for Dione Barbosa. In this one, I think Miranda Maverick is probably going to be a tough matchup for her. Miranda is 5 years younger. She's a little bit smaller here in terms of the height and the reach, but that's going to give her a lower center of gravity. It could open up her takedown attempts, and she's much more experienced at a high level, guys. She's 6-3 at the UFC level. She's got 3 UFC finishes, 3 wins by decision, 3 losses by decision. But her losses, Jasmine Jasudavicius, a ranked opponent. Erin Blanchfield, a top 10 ranked opponent. Macy Barber, a top 10 ranked opponent. Honestly, the Macy Barber fight could have easily went to Miranda Maverick. That was a super close fight. Then you look at the Erin Blanchfield fight. She got out grappled there, plain and simple. Erin Blanchfield, very good grappler, very sound. Then you look at Jasmine Jasudavicius, and she was also able to out-wrestle and out-grapple her. Now, thinking about this, Barbosa can get judo throws all day here, but I question her fight IQ very much. Yeah, I think potentially she could get a takedown, but overall, I think at the body of work, Miranda Maverick has done a little bit more. She's beaten Andrea Lee. She beat Jillian Robertson, who's a quality grappler. She beat Sabina Maza. She beat Shanna Young. She beat Priscilla Quechueda. She beat Liana Shojua. She beat Pearl Gonzalez. So she's done the jobs asked of her so far at the UFC level that weren't superior wrestlers and grapplers. Now, the question is, can Dione Barbosa, who's 3-0 career to the submission, who's got a solid, serviceable 4-1 record to the decision, can she make up those experience gaps and beat a girl like Miranda Maverick in terms of the physicality, in terms of the skill? I think of Jenna Bishop, who's 7-1 as a professional, as a litmus test, right? She just lost to Talia Santos via split decision over in the PFL. But if you look at her run in mixed martial arts overall, she's done quite well, and she won a bunch of fights in the LFA. She beat Luana Santos, who we just saw impress over the weekend as well. But she beat Dione Barbosa via unanimous decision. Santos was a very close competitive split decision. So I'll have to go back and rewatch the film. But overall, knowing that she lost to Josiana Nunes, it tells me that she could be vulnerable on the feet. Josiana Nunes has a great record for being a nasty striker. She's clearly got power in her hands, but she just got beat by Chelsea Chandler, who the fight before was being chased all over the octagon like she stole something, by Norma Dumont. Excuse me. So I think of this fight as a weird fight where I expect Miranda Maverick to do well, but I haven't always been thrilled by Miranda Maverick's decision making inside the octagon. And she did get busted up really bad by Jasmine Jasudavicius, who's very talented, very skilled. We saw that again over the weekend. But basically, anybody who can compete with her in the grappling phase has made it a lot harder. Andrea Lee, she's a much better grappler than. Priscilla Cachoeira, she's a much better grappler than. Jillian Robertson, at the time, was just not very confident at all in her striking, and she was unable to wrestle Maverick, so it was a tough fight for her. I don't know what to make of this fight from a grappling standpoint. I'm going to have to look at the finer details here. But overall, I've been a Miranda Maverick fan. I think she's got a high ceiling. She's powerful physically. She's got a good brain in her head. She's a smart girl. And she also has experience on the feet, on the ground. The thing I always worry about with a girl like Miranda, is that she just has a lot of options, right? Like she could always just choose to do something else instead of fighting. Sometimes these people that are all in are a little bit easier to get behind, but I do think the experience gap is significant here. Give me Miranda Maverick. I think she's going to get the job done, but I'm going to do my due diligence before I put any money or faith behind that opinion. But that's what my gut says, and that's what the topology, the record behind these two tells me. And I just think of Miranda as still the younger girl with more pro experience. I got to trust her to get the win here. Next up, guys, we've got a lightweight fight. This one's going down in the men's division, and I'm a little bit surprised to see Loic Radzhabov installed as a -150 favorite against a +125 underdog here in Trey Ogden. And Trey Ogden, guys, is 2-2 in the UFC, but he should be 3-2 in the UFC. The no contest against Nicholas Mota was complete horseshit. Anybody watching it knew that Nicholas Mota was screwed, and what was going to happen eventually was he was going to tap or go to sleep or just be stuck in that choke until the end of the fight, and then that was the end of it. So he was screwed, and Trey Ogden was going to win the fight. It was bullshit. He got robbed. Then he beats Kurt Holobaugh, and that was not a competitive fight by any means, motive whatsoever. He lost to Ignacio Bahamondes, and Bahamondes is 4-2 in the UFC, so I don't know, that you really want to take too much away from him for that. He beat Daniel Zellhuber. That win has aged tremendously, right? Daniel Zellhuber, since that point, has gone 3-1 in the UFC overall. So he has basically just put 3 straight wins together since losing to Trey Ogden. Then you look at the Jordan Levitt fight. Losing a split decision to Jordan Levitt is not a great look. I can grant that, especially in a striking-based context. However, Jordan Levitt is still 4-3 in the UFC. He's got a positive record, and the guys that have beaten him are all superior grapplers, right? Chase Hooper was able to submit him. Paddy Pimblett was able to submit him, and Claudio Puelles was able to beat him by unanimous decision. But typically speaking, Trey Ogden employs a good game plan, goes out there, uses his brain, tries to make fights difficult for his opponent. And for Loic Radzhabov, I think the reason people like him here is he's big, he's physical, he's strong. He's got a 2-1 record in the UFC, very solid. He lost to Mateusz Rzbecki, who's a very talented opponent. And you don't want to take anything away from him for that. But he also lost to Rash Manfield, Alex Martinez, Natan Schultz, Rashid Magomedov. He went to a draw with Islam Mamedov. So he's not been, invincible throughout his career, right? He also got armbarred back in the amateur days. So it's not like he can't be finished. He could be finished. He could be knocked out. We saw that in the UFC. He could be chopped away at with low kicks, right? So would you be stunned to see Trey Ogden come out here and try and spam low kicks and, shoot takedowns and just try and get one over on Loic Radzhabov? Because honestly, guys, I would not at all. And for Loic Radzhabov, last time out, it looked like he went through all the stages of grief in the middle of round 2 and then just found a second win, came back out in round 3 and finished the guy. But he definitely looked like he was slowing down at points in that contest. It looked like the pace was frustrating him. You look at his record, his stats, I mean, it's terrible, right? 2.93 significant strikes landed per minute. He's absorbing 4.73 significant strikes. His accuracy is 42%. His defense is 45%. That's all terrible. The thing that's been good about Loic Radzhabov is his takedowns, right? 6.73 average per 15 minutes. The problem, he's fighting Trey Ogden, who's never given up a takedown in the UFC. 100% takedown defense for Trey Ogden through his fights so far. He had 3 takedowns to 0 against Holobaugh, 3 takedowns to 0 against Moda, 1 takedown to 0 against Algeo, 1 takedown to 0 against Levitt. So I don't know that he's the world's best wrestler, but essentially what you get from a guy like Trey Ogden is he had a very serious guillotine attempt against Jordan Levitt and then ended up, I believe, on the bottom position as a result of that. So Jordan Levitt had 5 minutes of top control despite having 0 takedowns. I think that was a guillotine pull from Trey Ogden that he thought he had it, if my memory serves. Meanwhile, Ignacio Bahamondes just outstruck him on the feet. He's got way more length than either one of these guys have. I'm talking about Ogden or Radzhabov. So looking at this fight on paper, you got a bigger guy in Trey Ogden. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage. Both these guys fight out of the orthodox stance. They're similar age. So I don't see a huge standout on paper. The difference being, last time out, Loic Radzhabov kind of meme pulled that knockout. He was up 1 significant strike on the final count, 39-38, with 1 knockdown that sealed the deal. Guys, I could just tell you, Abdul Karim Sawadi is a talented fighter, but the one glaring hole in his resume is his chin, right? He's just a guy that can get clipped on the chin and finished. And, if you don't want to take my word for it, go back and look at his topology where he's got 8 wins by knockout, 4 losses. That's all of his professional losses accounted for via knockout. So basically Karim Al-Sawadi either wins the fight or he gets knocked out. That's just what we've seen from the guy up to this point in his career. And Loic Radzhabov was able to find that off switch, chin him. He was able to beat Esteban Ribovics. That's a win that will probably age pretty well. Ribovics has since come back, got 2 wins under his belt, beat Kemuela Kirk, finished Terrence McKinney in the very first round. All impressive stuff from, this guy. But when I'm looking at, what we've seen from Loic in the UFC, he's got 2 wins, 1 decision over a guy that couldn't wrestle very well, which I do think Trey Ogden can wrestle fine, and then 1 knockout over a guy with a really bad chin. And I look at the record of Trey Ogden, and again, you could poke holes in the fact that he's lost a couple of times out there. And I think the most glaring losses on his record by far are multiple guillotine losses to Thomas Gifford. But Thomas Gifford, his problem wasn't that he was a poor grappler or something like that. He was 13-3 career to the submission. His problem was he got absolutely beat within an inch of his life against Mike Davis, and he just probably was never the same again after that, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think that when I'm looking at this this matchup, man, Trey Ogden is a guy that hasn't lost via strikes in his career. So if he doesn't get chinned by Loic Radzhabov, I think this fight's going to play out very, very close. I'm looking at the odds right now. Trey Ogden has just flipped to a slight favorite on some books. He's minus 115. Minus 105 is now the best available price on Loic Radzhabov. So a lot of line movement here, guys. And let's see where we opened up at. So I'm pulling up our trusty dusty fightodds.io to just see the line move here. And where are we at? There we go. So right now on Bet Online, this fight is sitting at a dead pick of minus 110 apiece. It opened minus 175 Radzhabov. So huge line move to the Trey Ogden side. And right now it's sitting at about a pick 'em price across the market. There you have it. I think there probably shouldn't have been money, plus money on Trey Ogden, and now it's gone. It's evaporated. So, yeah, I don't think I want to get involved with a Trey Ogden fight. He fights close, even in fights that he wins. I mean, that Daniel Zahuber fight was a very weird staring contest. But overall, I just feel like Trey Ogden at plus money was the side early on. So, well done, gambling community. I think you guys have done the right thing with this line, tightened it up a little bit. Now it seems more accurate to me. I don't know that there's tremendous value to be had in either direction. Alrighty, folks. Next up. We are at the bottom of the barrel, guys, right now. That's me scraping the bottom of the barrel. Luana Carolina, Dread Carolina, is taking on Lucie Pudilova. And would you guys believe me if I told you Lucie Pudilova has never, ever, ever one time in her UFC run won a fight as a underdog? I believe that's true. Let me just check this. I don't want to give you false information. Lucie Pudilova as an underdog, guys. 0-6. Brutal. She lost to Lena Landsberg as a dog. Irene Aldana as a dog. Liz Carmouche as a dog. Antonina Shevchenko as a dog. Aylin Perez as a dog. Wow. She just can't get a win as an underdog, right? Now we're looking at this fight. Right now, this is a pick 'em price across the board. Let's see what the betting activity was on this fight. So Lucie Pudilova, guys, opens a plus 185 dog, and people must not have looked at that stat. They said, I don't care that she's never won as a dog. I'm betting anyway. So now she's actually going to be bet to a favorite. Maybe there's a chance she could win, right? When I think about this fight, I say, okay, Lucie Pudilova, let's pull up her UFC stats. I feel like takedowns have long been a problem for her, right? The grappling phase hasn't always been her friend. Number one, she's got a negative striking differential. So right off the bat, that's not great because I thought of her striking as probably her better aspect. So she got taken down twice by Aylin Perez, only landed 20 significant strikes. Really bad performance. She had 2 takedowns and 39 significant strikes in a close decision loss to Jocelyn Edwards. Very close. I thought Pudilova could have won the first 2 rounds there, if my memory serves. But in any case, she did not distinguish herself. If you look round by round, Jocelyn Edwards outlanded her in round 1. They went even on significant strikes in round 2, and Jocelyn Edwards outlanded her on significant strikes in round 3. So she actually got outlanded every round on the numbers, on the stats in that fight. Then you look, she beat Wu Yanan 39 significant strikes to 26, the only 2 takedowns of the fight. Guys, Wu Yanan could not buy a win in the UFC. She went 1-5. Really, really not good. Then you look at the other win she has, Sarah Moras. I don't believe she stuck around the promotion. She went, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3-6 in the promotion. And Ji Yeon Kim also had a 3 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3-7. Wow, her 3 wins, guys, are over 3 of the worst fighters in the history of the UFC's WMMA divisions. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to them. I just mean by the numbers. Like they're like 3-6, 3-7, like just terrible, terrible records. Luana Carolina, guys, she's 5-3 in the UFC. She's actually got a winning record in the promotion. Last time out, she beat and finished Julija Stoliarenko from the mounted crucifix. She beat Ivana Petrovic the fight before, ended her undefeated run at 6-0. She lost to Joanne Wood, and that looked like a really terrible loss, right? Except then you look at Joanne Wood, who went on to win her next fight as well over Marina Moroz, also a split decision, but it showed she wasn't dead in the water. She retired on top on 2 straight wins, so hats off to her. She lost to Molly McCann via brutal spinning back elbow. Was that a great look? No. Has Molly McCann made substantial improvements? Yes, absolutely. How do you know? Look at the Diana Belbita performance, right? Diana Belbita, a few years back, unanimous decision, close win over time, right? And she beat her up, but eventually, by round 3, it started to get competitive even because she was so tired. How about the most recent one? She absolutely dominated her in the first round, submitted her just like we said she was going to on this program, in fairness. But when I'm looking back, right, I don't hold that against her. She beat Lupe Godinez, who fought a week after her other fight in upper weight class, but still she beat her. She beat Polyana Botella. She missed weight for that fight. So Luana Carolina has had a problem missing weight. She got knee barred in comical fashion by Ariane Lipsky. But basically, guys, she has gone out there and she was, favored to beat Priscilla Cachoeira. She got the job done. Then against Polyana Botello, she was plus 200. She gets the job done. People didn't expect much from her there. Then against Lupita Godinez, she's plus 185. She gets the win there. Against Molly McCann, she closes plus 120. She loses that fight via knockout, but it was a close fight. Then she loses to Joanne Wood. And, again, close split decision. Could have went either way, plus 145. Then you look at the Ivana Petrovic fight, plus 185 underdog. Against Stoliarenko, plus 125. She's been a dog throughout most of her career. Now I'm looking at a spot where Luana Carolina, she's 31 years of age. She's going to have the reach advantage in this fight. And Luana Carolina has been 1-0 as a UFC favorite. You look back, and she was able to beat Priscilla Cachoeira. She was favored to win that fight. Only time she was. Now you've got an instance where she opens up a pretty substantial favorite. Odds makers liked her to win this one over at Bet Online. Luana Carolina, guys, open minus 220. Then the odds come in all the way. Now there's some love coming back that direction. So wow, this line on Lucie Pudilova got absolutely slammed instantly at the open. So this is a really tricky one. I'm going to do my research. I'm going to do my due diligence, but my gut feel is to go with Luana Carolina, who's a way more proven UFC level fighter. Lucie Pudilova's got a lot of improvements she's made on the film, but it's not translating to wins. And frankly, with this 3-7 record, like, she is the kind of quality of woman that she's beating in the UFC as well. She's got those same record, 3-7. I mean, just really bad. Shout out to my guy Pepe, says, Liam, this fight is at 135. Don't think Luana can leverage her physicality here. That's a great note from our guy Pepe Sylvia. However, is Lucie Pudilova consistent with 135? Yes, she is. Oh, that's a great point. What a sharp point by Pepe. And you know something? We got to think about this, right? She missed weight all those times. And I like to learn lessons, right? I don't want to make the same stupid mistake. If I make a mistake, it happens, right? We're all human. We all make mistakes. Want to learn from those mistakes over time. Last week, I gave a little bit too much credit to C-Rod, forgetting that he had cheated in those fights, right? He had come in above weight. He had come in, 5 pounds heavier than his opponents, right? And then when he came in at 145 on the same weight as his opponents, man, shit went sideways, right? Against JSP, it went sideways. Against Juliana Rosa, it went sideways. So now you got a Luana, who definitely has had success when she's been the bigger woman, right? She gone out there and finished. Right, you look at that most recent fight, Julija Stoliarenko. She comes in too heavy for that fight. 125, she comes in 128. She wins the fight, she finishes it. She beat Poliana Botello as an underdog. 125, she comes in 128 and a hook. So she's missed weight twice, both big weight misses, not even close. And the UFC's punishing her, sending her up. And now she's got to fight Pudilova. Now listen, is this a winnable fight? I actually think it is. But is it easy? No, because one of the things she's always had in these fights to defend takedowns with is that size, right? And so she started leaning forward on Lupi Godinez, making her tired, making her bear the weight. In round 1, the takedowns were coming easy. By round 2, they weren't coming. And there was never a change in Lupita Godinez's strategy. I feel like, a desperate woman like Pudilova who's put in the time, she's 30 years of age, she's still young, and she's going to be able to compete in terms of the physicality. This is probably a deserved line crash, right? I think that this is a winnable fight for Pudilova. It's a winnable fight for Carolina. The line now reflects that. It's a pick-em price. I think the market has once again done its job here. I'm going to have to look to the prop market, I think, to try and extract value. But right now, 83% of Tapology voters are siding with Luana Carolina, just 17% on Lucie Pudilova. I always like to ride with the minority report if I can, and that's how you try and extract value from the market. It's hard to roll with the masses and get paid. Doesn't mean that it's not going to work on every bet, right? Obviously, sometimes the masses do get paid, right? Sometimes the public does get paid, but just in terms of my general outlook and approach, I'd much rather be in the minority on a bet than the majority. Now, next up, guys, we got Mohammad Usman taking on Thomas Peterson. This is our final fight of the night. This is our first prelim of the card. And so I just want to say a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started on this one, guys. If you don't mind, drop a like on this video. If you enjoyed this kind of content, I'm here by myself talking for an hour and 45 minutes, almost 2 hours, and I'm happy to do it. It's my absolute pleasure. All I ask in return, just drop a like on this video if you enjoy it. That's a great way to show support. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, positive feedback, negative feedback, criticism, whatever it is, if you have that, go ahead and drop it below the video in the comment section as well. I do try and read every comment. I do try and get back to every comment as well over time. So if you made a comment and it's no longer, like it was time sensitive and I missed it, I don't get back to those. But virtually everything else, guys, I try and get back to you, whether it's before the event, right after the event, whatever I can. And even the negative people, right? Sometimes people write them things. They say, hey, Liam, I disagree with this pick. Here's why. Nothing wrong with that, right? Sharp people can disagree. I can always learn from my audience, as well as I hope you guys can learn something from me. So if you guys have something that I didn't think of, go ahead and contribute that in the comment section. I want to give credit. I always say, I hope you come to my show and get more information to make a better decision. Last week, there was a couple people saying Andre Petroski by decision is the easiest bet of the week. I didn't see it that way, right? I'm not always going to be right, though. So I'm glad we had those voices in there contradicting me, saying, hey, I think it should go this way. We're always going to air those voices. We're not going to ignore other people's opinions on the fights, because I want you guys to be in the best position to make your own decisions. I can only tell you guys how I truly feel. I can only tell you guys what I'm going to be betting on. But if I get it wrong, I just don't want it to be, hey, I had no access to other information. No, I'm going to share with you the best information to make a case for both sides. And then you guys are grown adults. You guys can decide from there. But I'm going to tell you guys, hey, this is how I see it. This is how I feel. And that's all I can do. So if you enjoy that kind of content, get subscribed, support the channel, and show a little love. I appreciate it. With that being said, guys, we got the final fight of the night to talk about. And I got to pull up on betmma.tips, where I'm tracked third party, by the way, for a very long time. Many years of third party track bets, over 1,000 bets tracked third party. I always say, guys, I've been wrong many times. I'll be wrong again. I've been wrong 1,000 times tracked on the internet on betmma.tips. I'm not afraid of it because I'm still profitable long term. That's the way that I play the game. I play a lot of plus money. I don't try and be Nostradamus and get it right every time. I try and extract maximum value, big plus money when I get it right. Let me give you an example. Thomas Peterson, guys, had not won a fight via submission, right? You go back and look. I handicapped the Contender Series, okay? And on the Contender Series, he got his first ever submission win. It was a win via key lock. He's 1-0 career to the submission. I had Thomas Peterson via sub, plus 1,100 in that fight. And this is what I'm proud of. I had a write-up for it as well, right? So I ended up making over 2 units of profit on a 0.2 unit bet is what I'm trying to say. Let me see if I could pull this up, okay? So this is my exact write-up from Thomas Peterson's Contender Series fight to give you guys some perspective. Peterson is being priced as a massive favorite in this spot, opening minus 350, inflating to minus 800, and then sitting at minus 365 or so. He's minus 315 to win the fight inside the distance, and he's being given less than a 10% chance to win via sub. This is despite Peterson having multiple submission attempts in his regional footage, looking for key locks and Americanas from top position. It was in the write-up down to the fucking maneuver. Key locks, arm locks. I tried to tell people what I saw. So again, will I get it right every time? I certainly won't. But sometimes I'll be the first to something, right? I'm an originator. I come up with my own ideas, and sometimes they're good ideas, sometimes they're bad. But that was a really good one, right? And we had Thomas Peterson by sub there. I also mentioned that Cole was vulnerable in the turtle position. I said he falls to his knees and he gives up the front headlock, giving up ground and pound opportunities. So for me, guys, I just feel like Thomas Peterson, I had a decent read on coming into the Contender Series. He had a very winnable fight against Chandler Cole. A guy who had struggled at the level, a guy who his athleticism wasn't quite there. And I felt like Thomas Peterson had a great opportunity to win that one. Against Jamal Pogues, the rubber kind of met the road, right? He fought a guy who had more experience, a guy who had been around a little bit longer, low center of gravity, not a guy who's been easy, to go out there fundamentally and bully in the cage, right? He has been submitted before, but you got to remember, guys, that's not really the game of Thomas Peterson. He went out there and got a submission over a guy who was underqualified, stuck underneath him, and not very athletic. I think of Usman as a guy who exudes athleticism and very little else, right? I'm not sure that he's the most skilled guy inside the octagon, but I've also given more credit to Usman at times than other people just because I recognize how much athleticism plays in this heavyweight division. You need some base level skills. You need some base level ability. But when you're fighting the Jake Colliers, the Junior Tafas, the Zach Paugas of the division, it gives you a lot of openings to go out there and utilize that athleticism, those natural God-given, attributes, right? He's big, he's strong, he's muscular. If he hits you with that big fucking hand, it's going to hurt you, right? Like it doesn't take great sophistication to see those things about Usman. However, it's the finer details where Usman starts to look not so good, right? He could get clipped on the chin. He could be, there to be hit in exchanges. He's a little bit slow. He got choked out by Brandon Sales in a fight where he looked awful. He got hurt on the feet and he slowed down tremendously. He got beat, by Dontel Mays back in 2018 as well. Another loss that hasn't aged very well. You look at the Mick Parkin fight. Mick Parkin was less experienced than him, younger guy, less physical. He landed some good shots early. He wasn't able to keep up the momentum, and he gave the fight away. So I think of Mo Usman as a very average guy. I don't think of him as a sensational fighter, but I do think he's a more physically gifted athlete than Thomas Peterson. I just think Thomas Peterson is a more skilled wrestler. When I'm looking at Thomas Peterson, he's 6 years younger in this fight. He did get a lot of learning experience in his last fight. I feel like what we should see from Peterson, if he's smart in this fight, is try and push this guy against the fence, try and sit him down with takedowns as early and as often as possible. And, don't exchange too much with this guy on the feet, because I think Usman's best chance to win this fight is to clip him on the chin and win it by knockout. We've seen Waldo Cortez Acosta, who's not known for being a tremendously heavy hitter, outlast in a pretty gritty fight, a back and forth fight, Thomas Peterson, and then finish him in the third round. We saw Thomas Peterson kind of wilt into his shell a little bit against Jamal Pokes, but when he's able to get takedowns, guys, he's a wrestler. Then he feels comfortable. Then he's, using his offense. When you can get these heavyweights to the ground, you can start busting them up with strikes. You can make them really uncomfortable. And if there's one thing we know about Mo Usman, when he gets uncomfortable, it can look like the Brandon Sales fight. It can look really dicey, right? It can get ugly quick on the ground with this guy. And when you have a big, strong, athletic guy that's not used to being in the bottom position, when they get put in the bottom position, shit starts to go sideways here. So for me, shout out to my guy Pepe, sharp guy, says, how do you not bet Peterson as a dog here? Younger with a lot of grappling upside. Man, I tend to feel the same way. Peterson's a short dog in this spot. I think there may be more money that comes in on Usman over the course of the week. I'm not sure about that. But looking at the opener here, you see Thomas Peterson opens up in this spot at a plus 155 dog spot. He came all the way down to a plus 105, and there was buyback on the Usman side. So I wonder how much resistance you'll meet Pepe on the Usman side here. I do think Usman's a much more well-known name. I think Thomas Peterson is known to a very small community, mostly guys that cap the Contender Series like yourself and myself. But I think primarily, what we've seen from Thomas Peterson is a guy that in his steps up in competition, he's struggled, So I don't know that I really believe in Thomas Peterson's long-term upside, but I do think that this is another fight where I would put it closer to, a 50-50. And certainly I think at plus 155, Thomas Peterson was the side. I don't know if he has the athleticism to get takedowns here. That's what my study is going to be about. Does he have the athleticism to get takedowns in this fight against a guy who's big, strong, and has a decent wrestling background like Usman? But I think if he is able to get even one or two takedowns in the early going, it could change the complexion of Usman throughout the fight dramatically. Right? I think it could affect his confidence. I think it could affect his cardio. I think he could get off on some damage from the top position as well. So for me, I think this is an interesting fight, a fight that could go either way. I could see Usman, like I said, winning by knockout on the feet. He does throw with errant power, right? Nothing super technical, but he could just overhand and throw. I think he's a little bit more athletic, but I think Peterson has some real skills, right? And that is what I saw in him initially. He's a guy that attempts offense on the ground, whether it's submissions or, ground and pound. He's going to attempt offense if he gets his fight to the ground. And shout out to our guy Pepe as well. He says, I agree. I bet Pokes against Peterson at plus 175, but a takedown could be GG, easy bet at plus money. Yep, I tend to agree. You're a wise man. So shout out to the rest of the chat here. We got our guy SD Crusader says, Liam the GOAT, you're far too kind, my brother. MetaHuman Project says, I can't trust a guy that looks that out of shape. I understand where you're coming from. Can Peterson beat Usman if he has the same game plan as McParkin? Speaking of Petrosky, he has a fight with Dylan Budka on September 7th. Wow, that was quick. Ohio versus Pennsylvania. We're going to really find out some questions and answers about the wrestling scene right there. But I think Petrosky probably a higher pedigree of jiu-jitsu, so interesting fight. Card is great for picking underdogs. Hell yeah, brother. I think there's a lot of live underdogs on this card. Pudilova is more skilled for sure. Slight lean to her and Luana coming up to 135. Fair enough. And last call, guys. If you guys have any further questions, comments, concerns, we'll take a sip of the old coffee, and then we'll sign off for the night. I think that's everything. So, guys, I want to say a few things in closing. Last comment here. We'll give credit to our guy, Pepe Sylvia. No, Peterson can't beat Usman if it's a 15-minute boxing match, to be fair. Yeah, I tend to agree. So that's my capping question, right? Can he get the takedown? I feel like it was the same thing with Tracy last week, right? I felt like if she could get takedowns, she was going to win the fight. I did more research. I felt like she couldn't get takedowns. That's why I felt like ultimately she wasn't going to win the fight. So I think that when I'm looking this week, that's the critical question. Great call, Pepe. Now, to sign off for the night, guys, want to let you know, that we're going to be back later in the week for Bets and Banter. So again, if you're new here, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for being here. If you're a returning member of the Sharpest Chat in the Game, thank you for your participation. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort, your intentionality, your energy. I appreciate each and every one of you guys for being here. God bless you all. I want to say that as well. I want to thank you guys for your time, effort, and energy. And until next time, enjoy those fights. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.